Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Magic is Real podcast. I'm Shannon. I'm your host. I'm a psychic medium and a lover of all things metaphysical and spiritual and life itself. I appreciate you being here. This is the podcast where we talk about near death experiences and other spiritually transformative experiences and the insights that people glean from having experienced the other side or other states of consciousness. Thank you so much for being here. If you like this podcast, would you do me a favor? It's a free way to support the podcast. All you have to do is like the video and drop a comment below, even if it's just a little emoji, if that's all you have time for or can't quite think of what to say. But loving words are also very welcome. So thank you for those of you who have been doing that, and thank you for those who will. And if you're new here, welcome. Today I have with me Joanna Oblander. And Joanna is kind enough to join us here. She is an author and a speaker. She is an author of a book called A Glimpse of Heaven, based on her near-death experience. She offers readers a unique window into the extraordinary spiritual realm. Joanna has also just written a children's book, which we will be speaking about as well. I'm a nanny, and I think it's wonderful that to share this kind of knowledge with children as they're growing to help them navigate life hopefully a little bit better. Joanna, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. I would love to know about you. I would love to know about your background, how you grew up, if you were spiritual, if you had spiritual experiences as a child, or anything as it pertains to your spiritual journey. I'd love to hear just a little bit about you.
Okay. Well, I was born in Idaho, but my family moved to Montana when I was very young, and I've been in Montana most of my adult life and most of my growing up years. As far as my spirituality, I have always been very spiritual, always just known that God existed. Just never had to explore that. I just very much sensed that and saw in the world around me more than an abundance of evidence that was satisfactory to me. Um, and before my near-death experience, I actually had a few um, significant experiences um, that I had in interacting with God and Him directing my life. I do mention it in my book, but the the Glimpse of Heaven book, that the Lord actually spoke to me and told me that I had a son and that I must find him. And that unfolded into a 6.5 year search for my son, Andrew. And it ended up being that he had a sister with him as well. And even prior to that, my husband and I saw Andrew and our 4 biological children prior to their births. They all appeared to us together as a group. And so I wasn't really a stranger to interactions with divinity, if you will, or having guidance that way. Of course, it wasn't in any way that I felt like that was an ordinary experience that everybody was just having every day, and I didn't always understand the purpose that God had behind that. But I did understand after I was told to find Andrew that part of the reason, at least, that we were shown our children before they were born was to help us understand that our family had been planned, that there, in some way, that had already taken place. The four biological children that I gave birth to all stood together in the order that they would be born. Andrew did not stand with them, he stood apart from them. And so now I understand that that was symbolic of the fact that he would come into our family through adoption rather than, you know, be born as one of our biological children.
That's pretty wild. Yeah.
So,
And so his particular soul was part of your soul group, in other words.
right. Yep.
Right.
He was meant to be part of our family, as was his sister. And they just ended up joining us through other means. And like I said, it was a 6.5 year journey, if you will, or search before we found them. And then we're able to make them part of our family. And we found them in Russia. So all of that is for me just evidence of all the divine orchestration that can be present in our lives. We found them, even though it took us 6.5 years, and that search at the end especially became very frustrating and challenging. And why can't we find them? And all of those questions that naturally would come to a person. When I found out that virtually as we found them, they had become available for adoption. They were 4 and 9 years old. They had been removed from their biological parents. And at the time, Russia had a law that they had to be a ward of the government for 6 months before they were eligible to be adopted. And that 6 months had just happened with them, and they had just been put onto the adoption listing when we found them.
So it's all divinely orchestrated. Even if it looked like it was going to be difficult,
Right,
it was meant to be. And so everything fell into place the way it was meant to, which
right.
I know exactly what you mean. I think just in general, with these life circumstances and things that all start to happen in divine timing, looking back on it, we can see how it was all coming together, which doesn't it, tell me if you agree, make it so much easier to have faith in the process once you start to understand the rhythm and the flow of how it all works, how the universe works, how we work within that universe, how we're guided, and how I always look backwards and say, I see exactly how this was unfolding the whole time. And sometimes
Mhm.
it can be stressful and sometimes we doubt. And I'd love to actually talk about that. And I do want to hear the highlights of your near death experience, as I know my audience will too, even if they've heard it before, which a lot of them will have. I would like to also talk about that, about faith, because
Mhm.
I think even if you have it, it can be so hard sometimes to remember. I tattooed trust on my wrist just so I could keep saying, stop. Why are you doubting? It's right. Stop. Like, why don't you
Yes,
trust? Anything you'd like to share about the process of trust? Why we have so much trouble being in that flow while we're here in the 3D?
that is such a vast subject for me.
Yeah.
It, you would think that having gone through that experience and having gone through my near-death experience, that I would just have that totally down and locked into place and know exactly what to do with every situation and every circumstance. And instead, the reality of it is I can look back on my experiences and say, okay, you have been through situations like this that were really difficult, that were frustrating, that you weren't understanding why it was unfolding the way that it did. But every single time, without fail, it has shown itself to have reasons and purposes for everything that you went through, for everything that you learned. And I personally am convinced that this world is meant to be a learning experience, that not only do we learn how to interact with each other and learn to love each other despite our many imperfections, but we also learn to, as you have on your wrist, to trust or to have faith. I think that's a huge component in learning how to trust the divine guidance that you receive. And sometimes that divine guidance is really dramatic, and um, there's just no question that you've received it. And other times it's just almost silent whispers, just impressions to your heart. I've had situations, and I'm sure many people have, where just out of the blue, I will have an impression that I need to call a friend, or I need to call a family member, or I just need to check in on them, or maybe even make a lunch date with them or something like that, thinking it's no big deal. Um, and I'll act on it and then find out later that they really were having a horrible, really difficult day and really feeling like nobody cared. And just that little interaction, even though brief and not anything dramatic, just helped them know that they weren't forgotten, that they were still somebody important in somebody's life. And, it ended up being a gift for both of us, right? Because we all have those moments where we think we're invisible to the rest of the world, where we don't matter, where I call it the imposter syndrome. I think I've heard that term. Other people use that term as well. But, you know, for me personally, I make it a goal to just try to live every day the best I know how. And that in itself is a progressive effort. How I know how to be a good person today may be nothing compared to what I know how to do that a month from now. So, but I just see that a lot in my own life, and currently, actually, as I'm preparing to release my children's book, having published one book, I was fortunate enough with the first book that a publisher accepted it right away. I didn't have to submit it to a bunch of different
Oh,
publishers. And that probably sounds like that was the most wonderful thing in the world. And instead, what I found was that the publisher didn't really understand that my book has a mission, which is to help people understand that God is very much aware of us and is a part of our lives as much as we will allow him to be. And so I ended up purchasing the rights to my book back so that I could market it the way that I wanted and felt like it needed to be marketed. And so as I prepare this second time to release a book, um, I feel really overwhelmed at times because I'm kind of a one-man show. At this point, I plan to self-publish, and at the same time, I am putting together an organization that whose intent will be to help people build meaningful lives and deal with emotional and mental distress and illness. And there's a lot that I have learned in the years since my near-death experience that can help people, that can help them help themselves. And then if as though that weren't not enough, my husband is currently serving in the Montana legislature, and because of my associations with a lot of different legislators here in the state of Montana, um, I had the Senate Majority Leader approach me and ask me if I would run for a Senate seat. And I thought for sure that that should not be on my to-do list. It certainly wasn't on my bucket list. But I am passionate about this country and um, just the Constitution and I've studied it extensively, and I know that the founding fathers of the United States were really divinely guided. They just, I'm in awe of them. And and I just think, okay, what if they had had the imposter syndrome? Like, who am I to declare independence? And who am I to think that we can go against the greatest military force in the world at that time and win? Right. And
Right.
so, anyway, after much contemplation and prayer, I felt like that was what I was supposed to do as well. So, I'm preparing to release my book and running for a Montana Senate seat and organizing this group of individuals who will help, will be professional speakers or are professional speakers and will really help um, to give resources and tools and inspiration and hope to anybody out there who needs it.
Well, congratulations. That's really exciting on both counts, on all counts, but also that makes me so happy, Joanna, because I keep thinking, I always say this. I wish that all people involved with politics and government could have a near-death experience. I think it would help them just kind of reframe
Right,
what's happening here, what the true goal is, what's
right,
best for humanity, which of course we all have ideas about how to get there. So that's
right,
why politics becomes very divisive uh,
right.
because we all have different ideas. But I think that most people, most good people, most well-meaning people, whatever their strategy looks like or whatever party they affiliate with, I think we really do all want the same things.
I
It's
think we do.
I mean, it's just different ways of getting there. And that's something I had a big lesson about that years ago. I won't go into, but it really opened my mind to really understanding that whether you're here or there, the people that I know, the good people I know, just all want the same things. We all want to feel free. We all want to feel seen. We all want to feel respected. We all want to feel safe and cared for.
Right.
And so if more people could lead from a place of compassion and
Hmm.
understanding, and like you said, trying to get along when we have different life experiences, perspectives, that's so normal. That's why in my belief, and I'd love to hear yours, we are all pieces of the same, we're all part of the same source. So we're little individual threads, but we're living different experiences. So that in this, we're going to be all these different kinds of people so that we can experience. It's sort of in my, and you could explain it the way you believe it or see it. It's like God wanting to experience being a human through all of these different experiences. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, from my near-death experience, what I can tell you is that I saw God.
Mm-hmm.
I saw, I don't know how many individuals there. The the difference between the two realms, if you want to call this earth a realm and that place wherever I had to travel extensive distances to get there. So it's not anywhere that's just like to the moon and back or anything like that,
It's not a
but
hop, skip, and a jump.
not a hop, skip, and a jump.
Yeah.
Um, I just saw so much there, which of course I'll go into when I relate my near-death experience, that I think that there are different ways that we can phrase things or have an outlook on things. I can only relate what I saw.
Yeah.
And I think that others who have had near-death experiences, I think we all just kind of know our own language, right? And how we interpret the experiences that we have. And so for me, I see us as offspring, literal
Yeah.
children of God. I know from what I experienced in that realm where he resided that the difference between that world and this world, there's just no comparison. There's just no way that you can relate in mortal words what that was like and how unified we were and how the love is just so pervasive and so it's literally to me like it was the air we were breathing,
Mm.
and I can't even say for sure that we had to breathe there, but it just permeated through us and around us and the the way we regarded each other and the way we interacted with each other, literally in my point of reference, was a piece of heaven. You look around at the world and you see the divisiveness and you see people finding fault with each other, and there's so much of it in today's world that quite honestly, there's many moments in my life that I just think, oh, can you take me back, please? I just want to go back there. I just want to be part of the love and the acceptance. And it, I can't say that I don't know exactly what we were accepting of each other. I just know that we were all very unique, all um, had different abilities, capacities, strengths, weaknesses, just like we do here. But instead of feeling that we had the right to judge somebody, that they hadn't progressed enough or they hadn't made a right decision, we would look at each other and know that we were very much different in our aptitudes and abilities, but we were just each other's best cheerleaders. It's like, yay for you, take, for example, two people, one, their talent is raising butterflies, and the other one is building mansions. And here in this world, the person that was raising butterflies, they would probably be brushed off and say, oh, that's how you're spending your time. That's all you can do. There, it would have been equally as important to us that that person was raising butterflies like, oh, those are beautiful. And thank you for beautifying our world. And and the mansion would not have been seen as anything less than wonderful either. They just all would have been honored and supported and given our support.
That's so beautiful. And it can be hard for people to remember that here because we humans tend to feel threatened or competitive it's like scarcity mindset a lot of the time.
It is.
And if you have that, you might take from me. Or if I give too much, then I don't have enough for myself. Or for whatever reason, and we have all these triggers from trauma that we've
Right.
experienced. So something you do might trigger me, and therefore I can't just be happy for you because now I'm affected, and that's where we're very separate, and that's why we always talk about in this space separation is an illusion. But why do you think we're experiencing that separation or the
Well,
purpose of
again,
that?
I refer to um, my near-death experience. So one of the things that I don't really focus on a lot in my book is that I saw what I've heard others call a war in heaven. And a lot of people think that Satan really does not exist. I saw that he does exist. And quite honestly, I have experienced in this world, I think we all experience his influence all the time, but I literally have had some of his dark angels attack me where I could see them. And that's a little disconcerting, I will just say. But I believe that God has a work for us, each of us to do. And it's not the kind of work, like I said before, where um, the one with the biggest bank account wins, or the one with the biggest house wins, or any of that. It's more like figuring out how to create heaven in this world, just like we had prior to our lives here. And I know that Satan is real and he works to destroy that effort. What I don't understand is how, after having seen God again in my near-death experience, because we were all with him before, how he could have rejected God the way that he did. It's like, having the very best amazing situation experience you could ever imagine, and then saying, no, that's that's not for me. It's a head scratcher for me. I
Yeah.
really don't understand it, but I see it. I see it in my life. I see that the more good that I'm attempting to do, the more I will see individuals in my life influenced in negative ways that are disruptive to our relationship. I will see people who are really good people um, reject other people who are really good people. And instead of being able to just recognize that we all have a framework that we work from in our lives. Some of us have experienced great traumas. Someone who was raised in a highly dysfunctional home is going to relate to the world much differently than a person raised in a very loving, supportive home, right? And yet, how easy do we find it for people to judge and say, well, you should you should have the same understanding I do, or you should have the same opinions. And I think that when we just try to understand each other, sometimes we are going to disagree. Sometimes we're not going to see things eye to eye. But I think there's always a way to work with that does not have to be as divisive as we see in this world.
Yeah, I agree. I would love to hear about your near-death experience, when it happened, how it happened, and some anything you'd like to share about it today.
Okay. Well, at the time of my near-death experience, I had been through the experience of finding my two adopted children, had the experience of the children appearing to us, which occurred prior to any of them being born. And in preparation for adopting the two kids from Russia, my husband and I realized that the amount of income we were making was really not going to be satisfactory for now having six children. We were self-employed, and that's um, a pretty good strain for most individuals. It's a lot of work. You understand.
I'm raising my hand. Yes.
Being self-employed is a lot of work. We decided to buy a second business. And when I was 30 years old, I started having 24/7 migraines.
I also have migraines all the time,
Okay, so
so I
you
know
can
it's
relate and you know what that would be
debilitating.
like. So, um, fast forward 13 years from the time that I started having these migraine headaches, and I just, we were running two businesses. We now had six children. Four of them were teenagers. Um, we were dealing with the two children who arrived into our home speaking nothing but Russian. And so there was all of that work, if you will, to adjust to each other and to help them um, become a part of our family. Uh, I was running on adrenaline, which is not a wise thing for anybody who listens to this. Please don't do that, because I did make that mistake, and it wasn't it wasn't the right choice, but I thought I was doing the right thing because I was taking care of my family. And so I had been through a lot, and I was running on empty, and just I just kept running anyway, and I was having the migraines. And because of that circumstance, uh, my physical health just really started to deteriorate. And I couldn't keep up. I slipped into significant, severe depression. I became angry with the world. I just thought this isn't fair. Why am I having to handle all of this? And because I wasn't able to function as I needed to, our businesses started failing, because I was a key component to those businesses thriving and functioning the way that they needed to. And I began seriously believing that my family would be better off without me. And I got a call from a bill collector one day. And, those are not fun phone calls anyway, right? Especially if you're a person like I am that just really, really wants to feel like I'm taking care of my responsibilities. And so this woman calls me and, tells me what she wants and wants me to assure her that I am going to be paying this bill immediately. I am not able to offer her that assurance. I explained to her what's going on, that I'm dealing with severe depression. I am trying to rise above and get things together and put things back in order and be able to take care of this, to please be understanding. And she let loose on me and told me that It was all my fault. It was all my choice. That I was this horrible, despicable person, and that I got what I deserved.
What right did she have? Okay, I'll keep my opinions to myself and
Really?
let you. I mean,
Well, and just recognize that I don't think in today's world that that would happen.
no,
Back then,
yeah,
it did. And I will tell you that I've since come to the conclusion that I think she just was at the end of her rope as well.
absolutely, absolutely.
And so I don't fault her.
Yeah,
I just realize that she's the person who tipped my scale. And it could have been anybody, and it
right.
could have been a different circumstance. But when she did that, she just, um, she reaffirmed for me what I was feeling about myself already, that I had become this huge albatross that was burdening my family, that there was just no way I was going to get out of this. Um, that I had, I was just out of juice. I didn't have, excuse me, I just didn't have any more to give. And because the mental illness part of me already felt like I was failing everybody, and that the world and my family would be better off without me, I I just decided that I was going to end my life the next day. And I had already thought of it. It wasn't the first time I had had that thought. So I got down on my knees. As I mentioned before, I've always been a spiritual person. I've always known that God exists. I've always trusted in him, known that I was greatly blessed. I knew I had an amazing husband. I knew I had an amazing family. Um, it, it wasn't family difficulties at all that was motivating my decision. It was that I thought I was going to be doing them a favor. And so I just expressed to God that he knew and I knew that I had given this everything I had and I didn't have any more. And I told him that I would be taking actions the next day to end my life, and that I hoped that when I did that, he would welcome me with open arms, but that if he didn't, I would understand, because I already felt like I was the biggest albatross that had ever existed. And I said, if you decide to send me somewhere else and you do not accept me back into your presence, I will understand and I'll be okay with it, because nothing can be as bad as what I'm going through right now. The pain of the headaches, the physical deterioration, the failing my family, just nothing could be worse than that. And so I climbed into bed and I cried myself to sleep. And very soon after I fell asleep, I was awakened by an angel, and he stood above me and he held out his hand to me. And I knew that he was asking me to reach for his hand, even though he didn't say a word to me. And I reached for his hand and he pulled my spirit from my body and took me through an immense amount of galaxies. I know that we went past many, many, many stars and planets and um, things in the heavens. And he pulled me through a conduit. I knew that we were in this conduit. I could see the outline of the walls, but they were transparent. I could see out of them and see everything that was in the heavens, the galaxies, very clearly. And I was amazed at how fast we were traveling, but yet how smooth the journey was. There was no feeling of speed on me, even though I clearly knew we were moving. And within about 5 to 10 minutes, we arrived at our destination, and my angel, um, who coincidentally, or not coincidentally, I'll say, I realized later was my grandfather. And so during the whole time that I'll just use the term heaven because I really don't know where that was. I know it was heavenly. It was everything I would imagine heaven to be. But my grandfather kept himself a little ahead of me or to the side of me and kept his face from me virtually all of the time that I was with him. And he didn't appear to be the age that I knew him to be when he died. He appeared to be 30-ish. And that's the age that our kids, when they appeared to us, had appeared to be also just a 30-ish age. Um, but there was purpose in that too, because my grandpa was very much a father figure in my life growing up. And had I known it was him, I never would have paid attention to all the things that he took me there to show me. And so as we arrived there, I was able to see this large complex of rooms. And I don't know how much area the complex took up, but it had to have stretched over what here on Earth would have been blocks and blocks of area. And I could see through the the ceiling or the walls however I wanted to. I could see the rooms and how they were arranged and where the halls were and where the doors to those rooms were. And I could look into those rooms. And that's what my grandfather had me look at first is these rooms. And these were classrooms. And people were at the front of the classrooms, instructors teaching those who were students in the classrooms what it would be like to come to Earth and what different experiences would be like. And everybody was learning what it would be like to perhaps have a handicap or to have the experience of um, perhaps being born into a dysfunctional home or to be to um, to have a particular experience. I don't know that I saw this because a lot of what I saw now has been kept from my memory when I returned. And I know that there's purpose in that, but the things that we were deciding on and that we were learning about was not about, well, I want to be a world famous movie star and I want to have this big mansion on the hill. It was what was going to help me be more loving, be more compassionate, be more like God. We we loved him. and we adored him and we honored him and we wanted to have those very same qualities that we saw him perfectly um, exhibit and that he demonstrated to us all the time. And so one of the classrooms that I do remember observing was one in which they were talking about what it would be like to have cystic fibrosis. And two male students were in the classroom, and after they had explained what that was going to be like, I remember the one looking at his friend across from him and saying, I think this would work for me. I think this would be great. And I'm looking at him with this mortal perspective that knows what cystic fibrosis would be like in as a mortal. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Um, I can't believe that you're thinking that would be a good thing. But that's the kinds of things that we were choosing. And we knew that life was not going to be a cakewalk. We knew that that the difficult experiences were going to have a greater propensity to refine us and help us be better people if we allowed those experiences to do that. And so I became really immersed in watching those classrooms for a while. And my grandfather then got my attention and directed me to look to my left. And I looked to my left, and there was another room, but it wasn't a classroom. Instead, I could see that there was just the room was almost empty. It only had two chairs in it, and it had one individual in it. But as I looked at that room and looked through the wall and saw the individual, I knew that I was seeing God. And I was so excited to see him again and so amazed that I recognized him so easily, even though as I was looking at him at that moment, his back was turned towards away from me, or his back was towards me and he was facing away from me. And um, I was watching him and I could see that he could see through the walls just like I could. And he was watching the door to the room, and I could tell that he could see that there were two individuals approaching the door. And so I watched as the two individuals approached the door, and he watched, and as they got closer to the door, he just moved to the door and opened the door to greet them. And when I saw who they were, I saw that it was me and the man that is now my husband. And I was surprised to see us there. And I knew that we were coming to that room for an important meeting. And I didn't know what it was about, but as God welcomed us into the room, he embraced each of us, and I began to experience the meeting, or that my near-death experience, both as I had the first time I had had that experience, because I knew that I was being shown an event that had occurred before I had been born. And so I started being able to watch the greeting between us and God beside my grandfather, beside my angel, and I was able to experience it again as I had the very first time that that event had occurred. And so as I was embraced by God, I knew from my mortal experience that I did not ever want to leave his embrace again. I just didn't want to be without him right there with me. And he uh, he embraced me, and that had to end, unfortunately. And he embraced my husband, Greg. And in that realm, we were not married, but somehow I knew that plans had already been put into place that we would be together here in this world. So that had already been decided. And so God showed us into the room, directed us to the chairs, had me sit in one of the chairs, and he sat across from me in the other chair, and he had Greg stand behind me. And Greg started massaging my shoulders, and I was a little shocked by that because I just knew that he was doing that to reassure me. And I couldn't help but wonder, why are you trying to reassure me? What? And I realized that he had been a part of some meeting that had taken place prior to this meeting, that he knew what this meeting was about, but I didn't know what that meeting was about. So God then began um, to explain to me why he had invited us there, that he had a very important mission for me to accomplish during my life in this world. And he explained to me all that it would entail. He was, I cannot remember now the exact details, but what I do know was that he was exceptionally detailed in everything that he explained to me, that he was thorough and he didn't leave anything out. And then after he explained to me everything that he was asking me to do, he turned around and gestured for me to look through the conduit that my grandfather had brought me through. And he showed me exactly what my life was going to look like if I were to accept that mission. And I was able to see my life and everything that would transpire and everything that I would go through. And I understood that what he was showing me was not static. Um, it wasn't foreordained, like everything that I saw was my life as it would occur as long as I looked to God for guidance. And if I rejected him or decided to reject my mission at any point in my mortal existence, then what I was being shown would change. And I don't know how, I wasn't given every possible um, version of what my life could have looked like. I just was shown what it would look like as with his assistance and with my continued choice to to do what I knew I was being asked to do. And I don't know the exact reasons why. Now, having lived as long as I have a few a few hints, but something, or maybe several somethings, of what I was shown of my life seemed to me to be very overwhelming. And in that existence, I wanted so much to serve God and so much to serve his purposes and so much to be like him. And I did not want to fail him. And I just thought to myself, maybe this would be better to let someone else take on because I don't want to fail him. And just like we do here in this world, we can look around us and think, they would be so much better at this job or at this task than I would be. So let's let them, in my mind, they're this proven quantity, right? And so maybe I should just let someone else do this. And I wasn't verbalizing this to God in any way, but he was clearly reading my thoughts. And he looked at me and he said, I would never ask you to accept anything that I did not know you were going to succeed at. And he reassured me that I would be able to do this, that he would never set me up for failure. He would never ask me to accept something that I wasn't capable of doing. And then he told me, as long as you remember me, you will succeed. And he told me that several times. And he held my hands throughout this whole time. And as he reassured me that as long as you remember me, you will succeed, he gently squeezed my hands, and I knew that he was right. I knew him, and I knew he couldn't lie to me. I knew that he knew my capacities and my capabilities much more than I knew. And um, and I forgot to share with you that as he approached the door prior to prior to being embraced, all of my memories of that existence were restored, and I was able to remember all of the interactions I had had, who I was, how amazing and remarkable I was. And I don't say that to brag, because that's not how I see it now, and that's not how I saw it then. It was that my understanding, my intelligence, my talents, my everything were so much greater than they currently are as a mortal. I I knew much more. I understood much more. I had a much more thorough comprehension of my abilities. And and I saw all of these interactions and all of these individuals and how totally remarkable we all were. And and as I mentioned before, how much we honored each other and just looked to be of a support to each other and to cheer each other on and um, to be a loving, motivational cheerleader for everyone that we associated with. And they did the same for us. And it was just such an amazing experience to be reunited with me when only hours before all I could see was that I was this horrible albatross that was burdening my family and their lives. And so when I saw that and I was immersed in that realm and just the spectacular, amazing place that it is, um, I was even amazed that I had that hesitancy to accept that mission that I was being asked to accept. Um, and I know that overall, our experience there was one of self-confidence and trust and belief in our own capabilities and absolute total trust in God and His abilities. And so as He talked to me and reassured me, I looked into His face and I just couldn't believe that I had ever been able to forget His face, that my mortal experience had somehow enabled me to forget this being that was just so utterly and completely whole and perfect. There's just was no gap in his intelligence, no gap in his understanding, his ability to comprehend all things. And um, as I looked into his face and just was so inspired by everything that I was experiencing, I told him that I would accept the mission that he was asking me to take on as a part of my mortal journey. And he looked at me and smiled and gently squeezed my hands again. And he said, "Thank you. I want you to know that you have made the right choice." And he then stood up and had me stand up and embraced me again and thanked me for serving him, thanked me for accepting the mission. And he started directing us towards the door. And it was at that point that things kind of go dark for me. And I have no memory of returning to my body. But then the next thing that I knew, I was back in my body and aware of what I had just gone through, what I had just experienced. I will say that I had honestly hoped that after I returned to my body, that um, prior to that return, I had hoped that my body would no longer have the 24/7 migraines and the depression and everything else that I was currently going through. But I did return to a body that was still depressed and still having 24/7 migraines. And, but I also had tools in my tool belt that helped me to hang on and to hang in there. And that helped me to see that even though I felt like a huge albatross to my family, um, that that there was a me that was the real me, that was not this person that I had decided I was, that I was in reality that other person. I just needed to find her again. And after my near-death experience, relatively shortly after, just a few months after, my husband received inspiration that he was to go back to school and become a chiropractor. And there's a whole big story behind that. But we ended up um, going back to school, and he became a chiropractor. And as a result, I was able to find the cause of my headaches. The MDs prior to that had given up on me and just told me that it was all in my head and I needed to seek therapy. And I already had pursued therapy because I was so severely depressed. But they found that monosodium glutamate, they helped me over a couple of years find out that it was monosodium glutamate that was causing my headaches. And that's why I had not been free of them for, well, by the time I found the cause and was able to eliminate MSG from my life, I had had the headaches for 15 years.
That's insane that your husband decided to be a chiropractor and you know that
Yeah,
that
it
was
wasn't
divinely
his,
guided.
it was direct revelation. Yeah, like I said, there's a
Yeah.
whole story behind that too, but
Wow. I need to remember to keep tissues in my recording booth. So much of what you said resonated so deeply. I just, and also I'm an empath, so of course when someone cries, I can't help but cry anyway. But I just want to touch on some things that are. I know I don't want to tell people how to feel and what, but for me, oh God, that was so beautiful. It touched on imposter syndrome, not enoughness. Um, Honey, you were, it's like, poor girl, you had adrenal fatigue. I've had it before, adrenal exhaustion. And I wanted to
exactly.
touch on that because I had it. I was that kind of overworker, hustler, fear of lack, doing CrossFit, working a day job, working a night job, drinking coffee. Because our society tells us that we got to hustle and grind, work harder, work harder. And when you've got children who are expensive to take care of, even more so now than back then,
Right.
I mean, you just can't, and you've got to be a wife and a mother this is a national crisis. So it's something I talk about. I won't go off into a whole tangent, but I've had adrenal exhaustion and I started sobbing when you talked about it because it causes depression because you're low on your cortisol is what you need to level out your I mean that's the stress hormone. And when your
Right.
cortisol is depleted, you're running on adrenaline as you stated, and the
Right.
levels aren't balanced and now you're literally in a deficit and you it causes depression.
Right.
And I've been saying this for years. I don't believe that people are lazy. I think people are depressed and exhausted.
Well, and I agree. And you won't be surprised to know that as I became better and healed of the 24/7 migraines, I mean, the whole time I had the migraines, I was trying to find answers, right? I was trying to look online, what could be causing this? Because I would prepare notes of my life history. Just, could this, when I was 6 years old, I was hit in the face with a baseball bat.
Could that be it?
Could that be it? When I was in high school, I had a gymnastics accident, vaulting. Could that have been it? So I had all of these things, and could they possibly be it? And so I would show up at a doctor's office with all these notes with the thought in mind that it would help them figure this out, right? And then I could hopefully accelerate this process and be better and go on with life. That never happened. They would take my notes, they would stuff them in the back of my chart, they would never look at them. Instead, they'd say, "Oh, you have a migraine? What medicines
What
have you
medicine do
been
you?
on
I
this
know.
far?" And for reasons I'm not sure of, the migraine medications at that point in time never touched my migraines, ever. They never gave me any relief. Muscle relaxants didn't give me relief. Shots of Imitrex did not help. Um, and so when they, excuse me, when they told me that it was all in my head and that I was just imagining it and that I needed to seek therapy, I knew. I knew in my heart I was not imagining that. And why would I want to go to a doctor? I don't find that experience particularly pleasurable, and it's expensive.
Hmm.
And I knew it wasn't on my, oh, happy day, I get to go to the doctor list. And so I have studied health extensively. Um, I know that there's a lot of tools out there, but the number one tool, of course, as you mentioned, is self-care.
Yeah.
Um, if you're running on adrenaline and you're never giving yourself any opportunity to rejuvenate, to take time for yourself, to even just have a few moments of silence, whatever that is for you that you need to kind of give your battery a recharging, you're doing yourself and everybody around you no favor. You know, you empty the battery and you're not recharging it. It's not very long before you have nothing to give and you're not helping anybody else. And so I understand very much now that digestion
Yeah.
can be a huge part of it. Adrenal fatigue, as you mentioned, is usually a huge part of it. As I see people now come into my husband's office, I often will work with them as a nutritional coach, and I do the emotion code as well. And
Mm.
um, when they talk about their, being depressed or whatever, I'll say, okay, share with me what's going on in your life. What's a part of your life? What's part of your responsibilities? And they'll start laying out this whole big list of things that's going on and what they're doing. And I said, uh-huh, you're living on adrenaline, aren't you? And I said, that's your number one problem right now. You've got to allow your adrenal glands to heal. And we'll use supplements and various things. But again, even if they take supplements, but they keep participating in the very same behaviors, they're not going to see healing. They're just going to see maybe a little bit of respite from their fatigue, but overall, they're not going to see much change at all. And there are other things, if they're eating food that is prepackaged and highly refined, those foods don't have what our bodies really need. I'm convinced that food, the way God created it, is our very best friend. And I also believe that sociality becomes a huge part of it. Even though I see a lot of people say, oh, I just don't like to be around people.
Hmm.
I don't like to be around crowds. Well, you don't have to go around crowds, but you do need friends. You do need people to interact with. And it may be easier because it eliminates all of the potential conflicts or the drama that can be a part of relationships. You still need to do that. And for me personally, and I tend to believe that it's true of everybody, I think my relationship with God is a huge component to my happiness and my health as well. And I had a portion of that component, throughout my life because I've already always known that he existed, but I didn't really turn to him in the way that I now turn to him, in that I will say, okay, here is what I have in front of me. This is what I'm dealing with right now. Um, please show me the best way to handle this. Please be a part of this. Please be a part of my solutions. And I also ask for help from his angels because I know because of my grandfather assisting me and um, the other experiences I'm now aware of that other near-death experiencers have had, I am completely, completely convinced that we have loved ones and family members on the other side anxious to give us help if we'll let them.
Joanna, that was so beautiful. Thank you. I usually say last word, ask but the last words, but you just gave what I such a beautiful. I will give you an opportunity to say any last words, but what you just said there, I think sums it up. And I think what I took from this, again, we choose our challenges in this life. People don't like to hear that because I don't, they may feel like, are you saying I chose this horrible thing? Yeah, you did. And don't, but it's, you have to be ready for that. You're not being punished at all. Like you
Right,
said, that young man that said, oh, yeah, I'll go have cystic fibrosis. Someone
right,
in this body with cystic fibrosis might say, why would I choose this?
right,
I'm sure there are a lot of people with cystic fibrosis who have said, I've learned this and I've learned this and I'm grateful, but it takes time to get there.
right,
And to understand that this isn't a punishment. No, this isn't something you created and you're being punished. This is something that your soul knew was best for its soul evolution, because when we go back home, it was really only the blink of an eye from their perspective. From
right,
ours, we might live 100 years like this, living in grief, having been
right.
traumatized, having to work through it all. But 100 years from a soul perspective is like a blip.
At heart, yeah, it is. It is. And that's one of the things that I saw was that the time, I don't know if there really is time there, but I knew that our absence um was in comparison 2 or 3 days,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
opposed to, it's like you're going for this quick trip and you'll be right back.
Yes, that's what I
And
always tell people.
and so um, those absences aren't the big deal, but again, they're they're very much aware of us. And and as we allow them to be, they're very much a part of our lives and the help that we receive. And so that's actually why I feel like I was deeply impressed to create the children's book that I'm about to release, is that I think that the time has come in this world where God is just wanting all of us to know more than ever. Not that others haven't known, and other generations and other civilizations and all of that, but He just wants us to know that there's this whole army of angels that we can't see that are ready to embrace us and to assist us. And so my book, it's not going to show an army, but it does show a grandpa who dies and then assists his family with their normal everyday activities and needs, and teaches them, not of course through a face-to-face encounter with his mortal body, but through his heart to their hearts. They receive his communications, and I think we often do the same and aren't even aware of it.
I agree. And thank you for putting that out into the world for those who it resonates with, who feel comfortable, or who are, as a nanny, I obviously have to be careful about quote unquote proselytizing or giving,
Right.
telling parent. When a kid asks me about things like life or death, I say, "What you should probably ask your mom about that," because my belief might be different from theirs. But I think that it's a beautiful thing, and I'm really excited to have been able to share this information that I've learned with my niece, with my sister's blessing, and and that I hope that it will help. I have a nephew also, but we just don't talk about that. He's younger, and I really think that I love hearing my niece say things like, "Oh, I really things are working out in my favor because I imagined it that way," or I she knows how to handle her life challenges, knowing that it's all part of the flow. And it's like there will be difficulties. And yes, there will
Right.
be hard times, but you're totally protected. You're totally protected by God, by spirit. And you actually have some ability within reason to create your reality based on your frame of mind. So, not that you
Right.
can have like you said, we didn't come here to just say, oh, I want to have a mansion and a car and everything's going great. Because do you know one person that hasn't experienced trauma in this world? It's for a reason, it's by design. However, there are things that we do have control over that when we what we believe is what we will see. And if we constantly focus on the bad, the negative, the scary, that's what our reticular activating systems will focus
Right.
on, and then our experience becomes one of fear. And so it's not that we want to bypass, it's not that we want to ignore these things or say, oh, it doesn't matter. You have cystic fibrosis, don't worry about it. In 100 years, it won't matter. It's not that. It's, yes, that's very challenging. And let's hold space for that and the feelings around it. And also know that you are protected. Angels
Right.
can't always stop bad things from happening, but they can help
Right.
us. In fact, they won't at all because some of it's in our highest and best, but they will help us navigate it. They will help us heal. They will help us learn to manage it. And as you have, learn what to do with those feelings and to wake up to what does your body need? What does your soul need? And where are we overgiving? And where can we compromise? And how can we better navigate, as you said, you mentioned difficult relationships. I know I have been in 12-step recovery for years for sex and love addiction. And part of how that manifests for me is avoidance and avoiding confrontation, not wanting to be in relationship because that means boundaries, speaking up, conflict. And sometimes I'd just rather be by myself, live alone, not deal with anybody, keep it light. And that way there's no
Right.
conflict. But that's also part of the challenge is also connection and love, and the conflict is part of growth.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah.
and allowing yourself to be vulnerable is
Ooh,
difficult.
I know.
It's especially when you've been traumatized,
Mm-hmm.
when you were vulnerable.
Yeah. Oh
And so,
God.
yeah, I know.
It's a big one.
It
Yeah.
is it is a big one. And I've, like most people, I think that my mindset at one time was that, if you just can avoid being vulnerable, then you can avoid being hurt, right?
Yeah.
And then I watched my two adopted kids, who were 4 and 9 when we adopted them, as they got older, and I saw them deliberately choosing not to be vulnerable in that they have what is called reactive
Mm-hmm.
attachment disorder. And they
Yeah.
would say, if you talked to either one of them, they would say there's no such thing, they don't have it. But I've seen them manifest it over and over and over. And they will forego pleasurable experiences just because they would mandate that they make themselves vulnerable.
Yeah.
They would rather not care than care and be hurt. And that is, it might be a safe place, but it's really a dismal place. And when we talk about being vulnerable and um, having those difficult experiences, for me personally, as I've observed my own life and the lives of others, I have never seen a person go through a difficult challenge in their life that once they're on the other side of that challenge and they recognize what they've gained from that challenge, that they would then give up that challenge for what they learned. And I see that especially with people who go through significant health challenges, like cancer or something like that. None of us want to have um, that word mentioned to us, that you have cancer or you have this or you have that. But then when they get through it, and it's like, I would never give up what I learned from that experience. I would never give up realizing that so many people cared for me, or that I'm stronger than I thought I was, or that I've gained so much more compassion, and now I want to help others who are going through the same thing. I think that that's our divine inheritance speaking to our hearts and saying, yep, that's why you came here. You came here to learn. And we just inherently know that, even though we really don't want to acknowledge, yep, I came here to have all of these really, really difficult, painful experiences. And the thing is that when we're a little more accepting, I'm not saying that all of us, because I'm still not in that total acceptance stage. I still have situations that happen. It's like, I can't imagine I agreed to this,
Yeah.
because why would I have done that? But again, I get through it and it's like, okay, now I see. This is what I was supposed to learn. And 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 I can be grateful and I can acknowledge that, yeah, I've learned this and this and this, but also I saw a divine hand in all of this, and how blessed I am.
Joanna, thank you for so much for being so generous with your time. You've shared your story so many times, and I know it's different every time. But in writing your book, in continuing to speak about it, in writing a book for children that I know will be very, very comforting and helpful in helping children navigate grief and understanding the greater purpose of death, and that dying isn't something, I mean, grief is to be, grief is something that's hard, but death itself is beautiful. And that's the mission of this podcast, too, is to let people know this isn't all there is, and that it doesn't mean that losing someone is ever going to feel easy. And that's okay. It's okay that we can grieve and accept two things at once, that death isn't to be feared. Grief might be, because no one
Grief
wants to
is
feel that.
hard,
Grief is the hardest thing we deal with in all of its forms, and also that when we die, we don't really die.
right?
We'd never die. Energy never,
Our
it can,
bodies die,
our
yeah,
bodies die, but energy can neither be
but
created
our
nor destroyed.
spirits are eternal.
Joanna, thank you. This has been so beautiful and so, whew, so emotional for me too. But I know that so many people will get so much out of it. So just thank you again for doing this, for showing up, for continuing to share, and for, as you said, using what you've learned and your pain to help others. That's if I always say that about me too. If there's one thing, I wouldn't take back any of the pain I've experienced, because I'm using it now to help other people and support other people. So that's a lot of why we're here. Uh,
It is.
so I'm going to have your links on your website link in the description so that people can find out more, buy your books, read your books, share your books, and all of that. But you're such a beautiful person, and I'm so honored that you decided to show up today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
too.
having me.
My pleasure.